News.
All right, viewers, welcome back. Our focus continues to be on the tensions brewing in the Middle East after Iran has launched nearly over 200 missiles in Israel. Israel, as thousands of sirens sounded across the country and civilians rushed for the shelter. This comes after Israel killed Hezbollah's top commander Hassan Nasrallah, and Iran had warned Israel on the retaliation front. The Israeli military has said most of the missiles were intercepted with the US help, but that there were a small number of hits. It accused Iran of a dangerous escalation and warned of consequences. Before Iran's attack, Israel had landed a series of devastating blows in the recent against the leadership of Hezbollah in Lebanon. It then pressurized on the Iran-backed terrorist group, which has been firing rockets into Israel since the war in Gaza began by launching a limited ground incursion in southern Lebanon. Israel has said it will continue to strike Hezbollah until it is safe for the citizens displaced from homes near the Lebanon border to return. Hezbollah has vowed to keep firing rockets into Israel until there is a ceasefire in Gaza with Hamas, which is also supported by Iran. Meanwhile, Israel has sharply reacted to these attacks. Israel has in fact said that Iran has still not learned the lesson and it will have to now pay for it. All right, viewers, that was a brief of what has been happening so far and a recap of the 48-hour long ordeal of what has been happening as tensions continue to escalate in the Middle East. Joining me at this point of time on the broadcast is Ambassador KP Fabian right now, and I appreciate you joining me on the broadcast, sir. Thank you for speaking to Newsx. At this given point of time, a lot of, in fact, worry is being put on what is going to be the future of a lot of civilians and hundreds and thousands of them living in Israel at this point of time, when we have statements coming from Israeli defense military as well, and US in fact now reiterating the fact that it's going to be continuing to vouch the support to the IDF as well in also combating the attacks by the Iran. How do you view these developments, sir? What exactly is your take on what's happening in the Middle East at this point?
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you, and through you with hundreds of thousands of your viewers. Now, what we have to understand is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been wanting a big war, and he has been provoking Iran continuously over a period of time. We all remember when on the 1st of April, a certain number of Iranian generals were killed in the Iranian consulate in Lebanon. Well, Iran responded only by the 13th of April. Why? Because that is Iranian style. I have been in Iran 1976 to 79 as first secretary. As we all know, chess went from India to Europe through Iran, and the word checkmate is actually shamat, Iranian. Shah is king. So Iran will react only after taking into account all the pros and cons. That is why it took time. And even then, if you remember, and this has not come out well, it's not known to many people, Iran had taken the trouble to coordinate, inform the US in advance so that Pentagon could activate both Jordan and Saudi Arabia to make arrangements for intercepting the missiles. Now this time, as Washington has already said, there was no prior information from Iran, and we can also be sure that Saudi Arabia and Jordan would not have cooperated. So that is point number one. Then, again, Iranian foreign minister has come out with a statement saying that it's not going to send any more missiles. In other words, for Iran, this is just another chess move. But for Netanyahu, no. For him, it is an opportunity. He has been wanting to have a bigger war, to have a regional conflagration. Why? Two reasons. One is that, two or three reasons. One is that he has not been able to meet the war goals in Gaza. He has killed, well, I don't know, say 41,000. 70% of them are women and children. Obviously, they are not Hamas militants, but Hamas is still there. So he has not been able to, and October 7th is approaching. Then he wanted to enlarge the war so that, he also wanted to make sure that Trump gets re-elected. Now, if there is a big war in the region, American election, that will certainly promote Trump's chances because he has argued and he will continue to argue were he the president, the Ukraine war would not have been there, and even this war, he would have handled it differently. And imagine one or two body bags coming to the United States, then we can be sure that Kamala Harris's chances for success will be washed out. So Netanyahu has a plan, clear plan, and the last point, President Biden has painted himself into a corner and he is unable to exercise any influence on Netanyahu, who has taken him for a ride again and again. Netanyahu has been saying that yes, there can be a deal with the Hamas, but then Netanyahu goes and kills the leader of the negotiating team. And Biden again, even yesterday he said, oh, I am hopeful there will be a ceasefire. So Biden is living in a make-believe world. It's most unfortunate. But there are very serious consequences for the region, for the world, and for India.
Also, Mr. Fabian, what exactly it is going to be meaning for days to come, in the days to come, with the nature of warfare that is being understood at this point of time. Iran has been using proxies mainly, and now it's engaged in a direct conflict. So how a full-fledged war between Iran and Israel is looking like? In your opinion, how will that picture be in fact like?
Okay, I have a little problem with the word proxy because it is true that Hezbollah has been funded and armed by Iran. But let us not forget that Hezbollah was established after the 1982 invasion of Lebanon by Israel. And it has got strong support within Lebanon. And even about another proxy, that is armed groups in Iraq. These are Shia groups, again funded by or supported by Iran, but they want to get the American soldiers out. So the word proxy, which the media have been using, is slightly inaccurate. But question is what's going to happen? Netanyahu will retaliate as soon as possible, and Iran will be compelled to retaliate this time pretty fast. It can no longer play that chess game of taking time to look at the pros and cons. So we are unfortunately looking at the beginning of a regional conflagration, and the civilian population will suffer. In a large measure, in the case of the belligerents. And oil prices will go up. That will impact adversely on the economies of oil importing economies, including India. And India has 4,000 Indians in Lebanon, according to the Indian Embassy website. The embassy sent out advisory on the 26th of September, please get out. But I have been to Lebanon, and most of them are poor people doing cleaning work, menial work and all that. They cannot get out on their own. So India should arrange for their getting out. One of the ways is to send them to Syria, which is friendly, and then they can be looked after there and then taken out. And in Israel also, we have a large Indian community. We have sent some workers recently, so they also have to be got out.
So two important points there we have. In fact, one is the going up of the oil prices, and how this entire conflict, regional conflict, as you have mentioned it to be, is going to pan out. And the other one is very crucial, sir, because we have been highlighting the fact how issuing an advisory will in fact not be just the only measure that we are looking at. The repatriation of the Indian diaspora, in fact, is the need of the hour in such a time, such a regional conflict brewing out. This, in fact, is the second step which India should be looking at. And I believe those two have been importantly and largely covered in your dialogues as well. Thank you for giving us your time. I'll request you to also kindly stay on with us while we get more guests on the broadcast. And at this point of time, joining me is Tal Hertov, who is a tour guide and survivor of the Palestinian Masjid attack. And at this point of time, she joins me live on the broadcast. Thank you so much for speaking to us and giving us your time at this given situation. We believe things are looking rough at every end. And you know, we have also spoken earlier when this entire regional conflict was in the beginning part of breaking out, but now there are days been passed, and how do we look at it is seemingly very different from what it appeared to be earlier. You know, how do you view the situation presently at your side, and what is the most concerning and the utmost worrisome part that the civilians are bothered at this point of time?
Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is. Thank you for having me on. It's a very, very, very interesting question you always ask. First of all, I want to say that there was a ceasefire on October the 6th, and that was violated by Hamas with the mass murder of our people and an attack. Only yesterday, the IDF published some previously classified information about surveillance that our army had conducted in Lebanon. And we found that the Hezbollah were building tunnels, they dug tunnels, they're storing munitions, there's video footage of this. They have maps in Arabic how they intended to invade what is called the Conquest of Galilee, which is a sovereign area in the northern Israel. So we know that the Hezbollah's intent is as wicked as Hamas. And I want to commend my country at the moment because, as the ambassador rightly said, you know, it's terrible. It's terrible that civilians die. And I don't think there's an Israeli around who will look at and see this displacement of Lebanese people and feel bad. Because why? Because we know what it's like. We can identify with these Lebanese because 80,000 of our own people have been out of our homes for nearly a year. And by the way, Israel has not received any humanitarian aid, well, except from Jewish communities. We haven't received any external humanitarian aid. So I could definitely identify with the concerns of the ambassador here. But I would like to hear on the international scene people talking about more why Israel has actually gone into Lebanon at the moment. And that's because we have 80,000 people displaced. Now, yesterday, I'm not speaking as a military person. I know you have Major Muhammad on the show. But as a civilian, and I think civilian point of view is sometimes really, really important to be heard, okay? Because these are the people who are affected most, or as much. And as a civilian, what does it mean? You're a mother, you're a grandmother, all right? You have to prepare your sealed room, and we do all that. We have a very, very good home command who don't put us into hysterics or... But the news did come in around 7:30 last night, and I remember seeing it on the screen, that hundreds of ballistic missiles had been launched towards Israel. And by the way, these were targeted to Israeli civilians. That's really important to say, and if people don't think that's true, we have footage. We're very careful about where, if we name the place, but we can see they hit a school, they hit a building. Thank God nobody was killed. Actually, that's not true. One Palestinian man was killed in Jericho, and I believe some of the Iranians were killed when the rocket went off. But as a civilian, and also as a state, this is the biggest attack on Israel as far as munitions go since its founding in 1948. An unprecedented attack. And I just think, what would have happened if they had already got nuclear weaponry? We would not be here. And if there's anything we can learn from this, I believe as a civilian, to keep my people safe, to keep Lebanese civilians safe, we have to, in order to get peace, we have to, it's a different neighborhood over here. It's not America. Peace is won through strength. And Israel has been superb at carrying out directive attacks with as least civilian damage as possible. And there are targets.
I completely understand and resonate with the emotion and the point of suffering from where you are also speaking to us. And I really appreciate you for being so courageous about, being so honest about how things have been at your end. But at this point of time, I believe you are the right person to ask this. The one that who's so attached with the ground reality at there. What does peace mean for the people around you at this point of time? Because this is in fact the kind of situation which the civilians had only been anticipating for a long time, given the kind of series in which the developments have taken place. It wasn't something that has been happening overnight. And at this point of time, the very important, I believe, which is very less covered in fact and underestimated question is that what does peace mean at this point of time? How do they look at it? And exactly, as per what's happening on the ground as opposed to what's expected, what does peace mean for the people around you?
Okay, it's a great question. So a couple of things, all right. First of all, when we talk of ceasefires, in Arabic it's hudna, which means a hudna is literally stopping fighting, which gives them time to rearm. So the Western idea of peace is very different from the Islamist meaning of peace. Now, for me, I think my own personal situation is also the way that Israel's going about achieving peace in this world. There's a sentence in Jewish writings, in our holy books, which says this: the person who is kind to the cruel is going to be cruel to the kind. Kindness isn't always the best option if you're kind to the wrong people. Now, in my personal experience, I was stabbed multiple times by Palestinian terrorists. I was nearly hacked to death. I watched a woman be murdered in front of my eyes. It took me a long time to get back to where I am today. And I spent years talking about, on one hand, it's being kind and cruel. I spoke on one hand about the heinous funding by the Europeans and the Americans of the Palestinian Authority, because the Palestinian Authority then paid salaries to Palestinian terrorists in jail. That's on one hand, justice. And on the other hand, we have mercy. And the mercy was, I started with a Palestinian friend of mine, a little educational club in a Palestinian refugee camp, to teach Palestinian children English and computer skills so their world would be open up and that they wouldn't become fodder chosen by their own leadership to go out in the street and murder Jews. So my example, on one hand, is justice, stopping the funding. On the other hand, it's to extend kindness to people who deserve kindness in the hope we can build a better society. And that's exactly what Israel has been doing since October the 7th. We've been punishing the wicked, and we've been very, very, very clear as possible, careful as possible, to make sure that we are not targeting innocent civilians. And if I may respectfully so, Mr. Ambassador, if I may say this, you said that 41,000 Gazans are dead, and then you said, I think, and 70% are women and children. Well, there's no verification for that except for of course, the Hamas Ministry of Health, which have been proved to be liars and murderers. And Israel itself, just to balance that out, Israel has sometimes taken months to identify one person. We have forensics, the speed with which Hamas can come out with how many casualties. And even the United Nations retracted the amount of convoluted casualties. So I don't think that kind of rhetoric really helps the situation in any balanced way. So to go back to our wonderful interviewer, Israel has to take on this Jewish ethos of being, of making sure we are not kind to the cruel, because we'll end up being cruel to the kind.
All right.
And how are we going to achieve peace? We have to deal with evil. We wipe out evil so we can spread goodness in the world and allow these people to have freedom and democracy.
All right, Tal. Thank you for having Thank you for giving us your time. It's always wonderful to listen to your views and your insights. We appreciate you giving us your time. Also, now moving on with Ambassador KP Fabian, who has been on the panel as well. Sir, when we are also discussing all the points that remained, in fact, uncovered, at this point of time, one important aspect that I also want to understand from you is that how this entire conflict that you in fact also shared your insights over is going to impact India's interest in West and Central Asia, be it the Chabar airport or the North-South transport corridor. When we talk about how is this going to be looking like for India?
Thank you. Just one point. As regard the statistics as given by the Hamas Ministry of Health was once mocked by President Biden. Then his press secretary corrected him and he has stopped mocking it. And the United Nations and the international media have accepted it. Now, coming to your particular question. Well, Chabahar, obviously we cannot proceed now for two reasons. One, the war condition, and second, American sanctions, which will be reinforced. As regards the North-South corridor, well, again, that will be affected. And not only that, also India, Middle East, European corridor, about which also we have been talking. That is from India to UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and then onwards. That also is now in the fridge for the time being. So economic impact is very clear.
Of course, that we actually have been highlighting for a long time. Also now bringing in my other guest at this point of time, Major Mohammad Ali Shah. I believe he has been waiting very patiently for being there on the broadcast. Thank you for being patient there. We are also discussing about the economic and at large the kind of impact that India is going to even suffer. And at this point of time, Major Mohammad Ali Shah, this is the right time, I believe, to understand that even the India Middle East Europe connectivity corridor that was in fact announced in the G20 summit did suffer a setback. So how does India look at these developments, with hope? There are, of course, major economic projects that are, of course, being invested and in talks with. At such a sensitive time, when we look at these developments, there is going to be very little hope for the projects and for the economic growth and prospect to be left with, because the regional conflict only seems to be escalating further, giving us more grim news and more specifically also for the ties with India when we talk about.
Right, Simran, that's a very interesting question. I always stand with humanity. My religion, my name is Major Muhammad Ali Shah. My religion is humanity. I stand for humanity irrespective, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Lebanon, whether it's in Iran, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in US, whether it's in Qatar, whether it's in Egypt, whether it's in India. I stand for humanity, and humanity is something which we all should raise our concerns for. Now, very fact is, when we see animals dying or even wounded for that matter, we feel bad. Here we are seeing human beings being attacked, human beings being dying, human beings losing their homes. It is indeed very sad, distressing, and painful. I agree to a large extent to what Ambassador Fabian said and to what my sister from Israel, Ms. Talaharu, said. I think their analysis made a lot of sense. They did not propagate any enmity, animosity, or hatred. They spoke in terms of humanity, and I think that is the greatest thing, that's the greatest blessing a human being can have. Now, the very fact is, when Iran conducted an attack yesterday and they fired over 180 ballistic missiles, most of them were intercepted, I believe, by Israel's high technology, the Iron Dome system, and by the Americans had given aid to intercept it. And Israel will not take it lying down. Israel will retaliate, and they have issued a statement. They're saying that they will retaliate as per their wish, a time of their choice, a place of their choice. In fact, Israel has also sent their tanks, their armored corps brigade towards Lebanon border. In fact, I'm made to hear that some of the tanks have crossed the border. They've entered Lebanon. Now, so far, Israel was attacking, and it was within air through missiles, through rockets. But if the fight comes to ground, then it's going to be very, very deadly. Simran, I'm afraid it's going to be very deadly. I will give you an example of Russia-Ukraine war about 2.5 years back, when we saw a Russian convoy advancing into Ukraine and it had entered 30 kilometers deep inside Ukraine. We were expecting a whole lot of bombardment and a whole lot of destruction. That's what's going to happen. And it's not just, it doesn't end there. It's just a start. Iran, on the other hand, has issued a statement that, our next retaliation is going to be worse than this. Now, Iran Supremo, Ayatollah Khomeini, was always in the favor of attacking Israel. Let's attack Israel. Let's attack Israel. Now, the very fact is, the clouds which thunder seldom rain. The clouds which give rain seldom thunder. So, till now, we were thinking Iran is only thundering. They are not going to actually rain. But yesterday, they did it by 180 ballistic missiles. And something surprising, I spoke to some people, they were saying, how can anyone not be wounded or injured in an attack? What can they do? Now, Israel has their technology of Iron Dome system, arrow system. They have a whole lot of technology over there where it's very difficult for even a fly, I'm told. I've been told by Indian Army generals who have been to Israel on exercises. They have mentioned that it's very difficult to penetrate into Israel territory. On 7th of October, it was actually indeed very, very surprising how Hamas entered. And I totally right now, without wasting a single second, is release all the hostages scot-free, safe and sound. That is the first thing Hamas should do, because if Hamas continue to hold on to the hostages, this is going to escalate to a large extent. What choice does Hamas have? Hamas doesn't have any choice. I'm sorry. Hamas has been cornered. They are going to be held responsible for the killing of thousands of people. Already 41,000 innocent people, mostly women, children, elderly, have died. In fact, in Gaza, and my heart bleeds. There was one Indian Army veteran, Colonel Kale. He lost his life in action. He was a retired army officer from the Indian Army. He was working in the UN. He lost his life in Gaza. There was a human aid of convoy of UN. Unfortunately, very close to the Israeli post, they were shelling and they were attacked. Whether it was an intentional attack or unintentional, you're in war zone. A bomb will land, a shell will land near you. It will not ask you your nationality or whether you're from UN or you're from Gaza, wherever you are. You just will buy it. It's very, very sad. Now, a lot of other countries, like say Japan, for example, Japan's Prime Minister has issued a statement that they condemn the attack on Israel and they stand with America.
All right.
In providing aid to that it doesn't escalate. Yes.
All right, Major Mohammad Ali Shah, you have ticked all the right points, in fact, while decoding and breaking it down for our viewers about the entire Middle East crisis and the regional conflict escalation. Now, viewers, that was all the news of the nation and the world. We'll continue to track all the developments very closely. Please stay with us.